This is the 2012 Prius Plug-In Hybrid. Now we've taken a look at the prototype for this model. We'll put a link for that video down below or at the end of the video, somewhere you'll find it. But this is the actual production model. Now unlike the Volt, this is not some sort of electric car with a range extender or however you want to look at the Volt. This is just a regular old Prius, and what Toyota's done is they've put a much bigger battery pack in the trunk, and they've given you the option of driving only on that electric battery pack or having that electric battery pack augment your regular gasoline driving for about the first 13 miles to improve your fuel economy. This makes this Prius actually one of the most fuel-efficient vehicles that's currently available in North America. Let's hop in, let's dive under the hood, let's dive under the back here where the batteries are located and take a look. Under the hood of the Prius plug-in, it's actually kind of interesting. Nothing had to change for the Prius plug-in other than some software. We get the same 98 horsepower, 1.8 liter Atkinson cycle 4-cylinder engine, that's kind of a mouthful there, mated to the same hybrid power splitting device. Now that power splitting device is what's important here. The regular Prius can only go electric only with very limited throttle and very limited speed ranges because the battery pack is actually the limiting factor. The way that this hybrid drivetrain works is quite interesting, and you can find more information on that on the web. But basically MG2, the motor that's actually driving the car forward most of the time when it's in hybrid mode, and indeed helping in all aspects of Prius locomotion, is about as powerful as the engine itself. It's right around 100 horsepower. But the regular Prius can't deliver enough power to that motor directly from the battery pack in order to drive the car forward. It actually requires motor generator 1 to be supplying power to motor generator 2 to actually help the car move forward. All that you really need to know about that is that the Prius plug-in has a bigger battery which allows that motor to put out more power to drive you electric only. I'm assuming, of course, that you're watching this because you already have a Prius and you just want to know how the Prius plug-in works. So if these technical details are boring you, you should probably watch one of our other videos. The interior on the plug-in Prius is exactly the same as the regular Prius. There really haven't been any changes here. We get the same hard plastic dash, same flat bottom steering wheel, same hard center console and hard doors. That's the important thing to know with these plug-in vehicles as well as pure electric vehicles like the Nissan Leaf and the Ford Focus Electric is that drivetrain costs so much that you get the same interior as a lower cost car in your higher cost vehicle. So again, $32,000, we have an interior that's more appropriate in a $20,000 car, which is right around where the Prius actually starts. This particular model does have the electric driver's seat here, as you can see. I would definitely choose that if I were to buy this vehicle. It is far more adjustable than the manual seat. It also has power lumbar. That's definitely a nice option. The regular Prius seat, you can't adjust the tilt of the seat bottom, and that's something that I really do like. Of course, the gauges are still in the center, which is something I don't really care for. But everything else on the inside is quite nice. It's very roomy and very airy, especially compared to the Volt, which feels a little bit more closed in. Just like the regular Prius, we have a variety of different infotainment options. Our car is equipped with the high-end JBL Green Edge system with navigation and, of course, iPhone integration with iTunes apps. We have the usual energy monitor. We have our access to XM fuel prices, nav weather, XM stock, sports, etc. We have our typical mapping system here, as you can see. We have satellite radio, we have decent iPhone and iPod integration. The system is a little bit slower than I would like, but it does work fairly well. We have our usual CD and AM/FM satellite radio as well. Now, one step down from this system is the Toyota Entune system, which has a slightly smaller screen and has a different mapping setup. It uses your smartphone to get the data for your nav system, your traffic, and other incidents. I think that's actually my personal favorite as far as the Toyota nav systems go. We'll pop a link sort of around here so you can check out that system on our Prius C video. Continuing down the center console, we have our single zone climate control, just like a regular Prius. We have our new HV/EV button here, which allows you to switch in and out of hybrid and electric vehicle mode. We have our eco mode button and our power button. Of course, the funky little Prius shifter joystick with the park button as well. With only a limited number of exceptions, the further back in a car you go, the less comfortable the seats get. It's true here in the Prius. Although these seats are pretty good, the seat bottom cushion is a little bit low to the ground for an adult like me that's 6 feet tall. As you can see, however, legroom is very, very good in the Prius. We have room that's very similar to something like a Honda Accord or Toyota Camry in the Prius legroom-wise. Although the Prius isn't as wide as a standard midsize or full-size sedan, so fitting 3 adults here in the rear is a little bit cozy. As with many cars these days, this middle rear seat has fairly limited headroom. However, we do get a fairly nice armrest with cup holders in the rear, as well as the typical 60/40 folding rear seat. And in the Prius, this actually folds almost completely flat, which is very nice. Really does expand your cargo room quite a bit, and it makes the Prius very handy all the way around because of these folding seats and because it's a liftback. If you'd seen our video on the Prius plug-in prototype, you'd notice that in the prototype, the cargo area was reduced by about an inch or an inch and a half because of the battery positioning, but they've fixed that in the production version. Not only does it not actually take up any more trunk room, but we also get an interesting little cargo area here, hidey hole, for your regular old plug-in charging cable here, which is kind of nice. You can also store a few other things in there. You get some small storage compartments on either side, but of course there's no spare tire in the Prius plug-in. Instead, we just get a can of Fix-A-Flat here in the corner. Other than that, however, the cargo area is still very good. I have the roller bag in here as well as a computer bag, and we'll see how we fit. It's a bit cozy with a bag here in the back, but it is completely possible to fit a journalist in the trunk. Compared to the Volt, the Prius plug-in's battery is small. Compared to the Leaf, it's microscopic. There's a good side to that, however. That means this included 110-volt cord. We should be specific. This is not a charger because the charger is actually part of the electric vehicle. All these chargers and charger cables that you see around town, all they really are is just over-glorified extension cords. They supply the power to the car and they tell the car, hey, I have 110 volts here, you can charge now. With this cord, this Prius plug-in will charge completely to capacity, again only about 12 miles, in about 3.5 hours. If you do have access to a 240-volt charging station, it'll cut that in half, so about an hour and a half or so. But there really isn't a need to get one. Honestly, 3 hours, 3.5 hours to charge your Prius plug-in, completely easy to do that at night during off-peak hours. Totally easy to not only charge when you get to work, but also have a charged battery when you go to lunch, plug it back in at work if your employer has a charging station available, of course, and then have another full battery for your return trip home. It's not often that I find a nifty little feature that just needs to be mentioned in a video, but the Prius plug-in has one. Have you ever had a liftback or hatchback and you go somewhere to buy something large or bulky and you have that little roller cover that covers your cargo area so people don't steal your stuff? And you have to take it out in order to put whatever it is that you're buying in the vehicle, but you don't know where to put it, so you either jam it inside or you leave it somewhere. Well, the Prius plug-in has this nifty little cubby there in the charging area. I find that quite handy. It seemed odd to have a normal drive segment in a video about the Prius plug-in because the market for the plug-in, in my mind at the very least, is a little bit different than a standard car. Part of that's price. This Prius plug-in costs about $40,000 as we have equipped. The base price of the Prius plug-in is $32,000. The base price of a regular Prius is about $22,000. So there's a $10,000 extra charge for that plug-in ability. And for that plug-in ability, you do have, the ability to go about 12 miles electric only at the beginning of your trip, or you can reserve a portion of it by pressing this little HV/EV button here on the dash. But even still, that only is going to improve your fuel economy a certain amount. And because the Prius plug-in doesn't have the heat pump of the original prototype and it doesn't have an electric heater, if you live in a climate where it's cold, you're actually going to be running that engine to heat the cabin because that's the only method for cabin heating that the Prius has, is the regular old heater core that uses engine coolant to heat the cabin. So therefore, you're still, in reality, with the Prius plug-in, going to be using electricity and gasoline, especially if you drive on a freeway as well. Again, 62 miles an hour is the maximum speed that you can drive electric only in this Prius plug-in, and that really is dependent on a number of factors like how hard you press on the accelerator pedal, whether you're going up a hill, things like that. So, in my daily commute, I really end up using the engine pretty much right away. So as soon as I leave the house, in the morning here, even in the summer in this part of Northern California, it's 49 degrees outside, so most people would like to use a cabin heater for that to bring it up to somewhere in the 60s or 70s. So the engine starts up. The engine may turn off after a short while, but in order to get my car up the hill, because I do live at around 500 feet, I have to go up and over a 2,200-foot mountain pass, the engine has to turn on for that as well. However, one of the benefits of this hybrid, if you live in mountainous terrain like I do, is that on the downside of that 2,200-foot mountain pass, a regular Prius would not be able to regenerate all the way down the hill. It would actually run out of battery storage room somewhere around maybe 1/5, 1/6 of the way down the hill. But the Prius plug-in can continue charging all the way down the hill, and that is kind of nice. But again, you know, $10,000 more than a regular Prius. My estimate for repayment on my driving style, getting 20% better mileage than a regular Prius because of that plug-in ability for that first 12, 13 miles or so, it would be about 204,000 miles. And that would take me an awfully long time to repay the cost of the Prius plug-in. So if the point is not reducing your actual travel expenses, and the point of the Prius plug-in is I want the latest, greenest technology, then actually the Prius makes sense in that case, because I would rather have a Prius than a Chevy Volt. A Volt and a Leaf being electric vehicles, if you're talking about just pure electric range, then there's a problem, because even the Leaf's electric only range is about 100 miles if you treat it very, very, very gently. The Prius here, if you plug it in and you have a full tank of gas, your range is about 600 miles. More similar to the Volt in that respect. However, on the inside, the Volt is actually fairly cheaper, fair bit cheaper than this Prius. The Volt's plastics seem to scratch easily. I don't really care for the dash and the gauge arrangement. Not that I'm really in love with the Prius's gauges either. I mean, this whole center-mounted gauge thing here is just weird to me. And the gauges are a tiny bit low rent for a car that's $32,000, mind you. But that being said, the rest of the interior in the Prius is more airy. It's, you know, a little bit nicer, I think, than the Volt. It's also cheaper than the Volt. The Volt's $40,000. This starts at $32,000. Similarly equipped, there's still a decent difference between the two. You still get to drive in the carpool lane with all three of these vehicles, the Volt, the Prius plug-in, and the Leaf. So that really doesn't matter between them. So if you're looking for something that is green, is interesting technology, and overall is efficient, this Prius actually is a good blend. Back to the Volt. Here's the reason that I would get this over the Volt. Our Volt, in exactly the same commute that I'm doing with this Prius plug-in, which is about 53 miles each way, so just under 120 miles a day, involving a 2,200-foot mountain pass in between, and the rolling hills, traffic, as well as as regular highway traffic, I should say, as well as high-speed highway traffic on Interstate 280. This Prius has been averaging 68 miles per gallon overall, and that actually is a 20% improvement over a regular Prius. However, the Chevy Volt in these same circumstances averaged about 40 miles per gallon. That's a decent amount less. The reason for that is once the batteries exhaust on the Volt, you're left with a vehicle that's only getting maybe 30 miles per gallon or so in my tests and in my commute. Whereas with the Prius, when your batteries run out, you're still getting about 50 miles per gallon on the highway easily. Now that's all a technology thing, because of course the Volt, the only way that it can run is the engine runs a generator, which then powers a motor. There is a tiny little clutch pack in there which can connect the engine directly to the output, but it's not used very often. But the reason that it's there is exactly why the Prius doesn't do that. Because if you're just cruising along on the highway, that electrical connection between engine, generator, motor is just not the most efficient way to propel a vehicle. And that's where the parallel hybrid drivetrain that's in the Prius actually becomes more efficient in many of our driving cycles if you're using gasoline. And that's because the engine or the electric motors, or both at the same time, can power this vehicle forward. That transmission and engine arrangement is very complicated, so we'll post a link somewhere down below or at the end of the video to some videos that actually explain exactly how that transmission works. But the important thing you need to know is this vehicle can use gasoline or electricity to actually move the vehicle forward, and because of those arrangements, the Prius is considerably more efficient than the Volt when your battery runs out. And the Volt's battery ran out for us at around 20 miles, which means that it really only got about 8 or 9 miles more out of its electric range than the Leaf, or than this Prius does. But the charging time is longer because the Volt's battery is heavier, and part of the reason for that distance, of course, is the weight of that battery.